Good day everyone, and welcome to another part of the 4Anime series. Today we will be talking about fire. In this section we will be talking about a campfire. Now I did cover a little bit of how to do this in the previous vlog for the Exodus 7 to 12 KJV project, which you can find in the description. But I am going to redo this so that I have it separately and that you don't have to go through all the vlogs to find the one which has it. Exactly. So let me get into it. So as you can see, we have a normal project over here, very typical of my default projects, a little bit of environment lighting, enablement to have some ambient occlusion without actually having to enable ambient occlusion, and that sort of thing. But for this video, it's not technically necessary to do that because I'm going to show you how to make a shadeless object. So it's not going to have any shadows. But what we are going to do is we are going to add some shapes. We are going to add a point lamp for our fire, and we are going to animate it. So first we are going to add a cylinder, because the cylinder is the shape we use to create our fire with. Just have to place it nice and in there. It's good to keep a solid amount of resolution. The default 32 faces around the edges is wonderful. You can delete the top and bottom faces. It messes with the unwrap. Just delete those faces. And I would recommend that you subdivide this quite substantially. Not over subdivide it, but just give yourself square faces. That is good. Now remember, you can go low resolution on this because you can apply this method to any kind of resolution. It's just the more resolution you have, the higher resolution your fire can be, the bigger it can look. It's as simple as that. So now that we have this, we are going to unwrap it. So you have to make one seam, preferably away from the camera. It's not necessary, but preferably away from the camera. The higher the resolution is, the more noticeable the seam would be. So you can mark that seam. Okay, that is cool. Select everything. Make sure it's nice and directly on the cylinder. Almost said sphere. And project from cylinder projection, not project from. Okay. Now we just need to check that it's unwrapped properly. That is cool. Tab out, and now we can shrink it. So I prefer to use this sharp one so that we get that kind of a cone closure at the top. Okay, that's nice. Do the same thing at the bottom with less influence so that it's a bit of a teardrop type shape. If you feel inclined to do so, I would recommend you add a little bit more detail at the bottom, since it kind of closes off. And because it closes off, you can create kind of like a triangle fan type of effect at the bottom, and you just don't want that. It looks awful. Okay, then we can just expand this a little bit, and you get kind of like a sharp egg. Okay, that's cool. And now at the bottom, you can collapse these faces. So how you do that is you press Alt-M and collapse. And the same at the top, except for that one, Alt-M and collapse. And if you want to, you can just play with these settings at the top, but since we're fading it out from the top, it's not really necessary. What you can do though is, if you want to, you can stretch this out so that you have a taller kind of flame. So for example, just using the edge loop function to just break it up as it goes to the top, progressively, instead of just, slow and then sudden fast. It's not very convincing. Okay. Just doing some minor adjustments here. And there you have a little cone, upside down cone. Mark that as smooth. Now we get to add a material. So let's just call this campfire. Now remember, I'm just calling this campfire because this is the most typical use for this, but you can also use this for an object that's burning. You can even use this as the result of explosions. You can use this on burning arrows. Actually, I have used this on burning arrows, which you can see right now, just as an example. But you really can use this for quite a wide variety of localized fires. Yes, that's the word I was looking for, localized fires. Praise you, Lord. Okay, so let's create our material, call this fire. And we're not going to bother with Toon and all that kind of stuff because it is shadeless. We just want to make it as bright as possible. What I would say, though, is this color that you pick here has to be the darkest color of your fire. So generally, campfires have a nice, warm, orangey glow to them. So I'm going to go for an orange. I'm going to go for an orange. Anybody hungry? Okay, so we will need transparency, but we'll do that later. So all I did now was I just turned the alpha off for later. We need full oversampling so that it's nice and smooth. We're going to add some constant textures to this. Give it its own pass index, just so it's not included in anything else if you do decide to put this with your background elements as well. Receive transparent shadows, all that kind of stuff is just absolutely not necessary, so you can just chuck those. And now we're going to add textures. So I'm going to add quite a few textures in here, about 5. And the first one will be large displacement, because you have larger wobbles in the flame as opposed to shorter, smaller waves. And so obviously small displacement. You only need the 2. You don't need any excessive stuff beyond that. You get your normal color. And the last one will be alpha. And the second to last is our alpha distortion. So that we can get kind of like a breakup the closer it gets to the top, you know. Just want to spell distortion correctly. Okay, that's great. Now we're going to kick it off with the normal color, making it a blend texture. The alpha distortion is a cloud texture. Alpha itself is another blend. And of course, our first 2 will also be cloud textures. Okay, we'll start with the normal color. You leave it on horizontal and you set the coordinates to Z, Y, Z, and normal. That gives you a straight up view to the camera for the normal influence. Let me show you what I mean by that. So let's say we put this on here, and let's make this quite strong, make it blue, and make this red, so it's nice and strong, focus. Okay, let's just reduce the blue because this is a very sensitive setting. Okay, and now we select the monkey. You can see everything that's perfectly round and facing the camera is blue, and everything else that edges off fades to the red. So that's why we're using this. But because we have fire, we're going to use the round as our reference. Just going to delete the red. No, I'm not going to delete it. I'm just going to make it clear. And set it to constant. And yeah, that's fine. And now we're taking the blue and we are making it a yellow. Not too strong yellow, because it is going to be amplified. Just ignore the cloud textures there, what's causing it to be pink. Okay, and give it a nice strong yellow. Something along these lines should do. This is just so we can actually see the result. That's great. Now let's pick our large displacement. And we give it some of a color ramp. Now this one I noticed in my notes that I created this one to have a sharpness to it. Now I don't remember why initially God led me to add the sharpness, but I just know that it works. So I'm going to be adding it in this case as well. So it's just going to be flipped and it's set to ease. Make it nice and strong there. And we're going to be using the Voronoi F2 minus F1. The size is going to be 0.5. The depth is going to remain normal. And it's going to be hard. Set to hard. And of course, I'm using UV coordinates. The normal box I'm going to leave unchecked, but I am going to turn it down to 0. And the displacement I'm going to put on 1. Now, I'm using the settings I got from my notes. but we are going to be adjusting these later. So you can think of this as like a good starting point. This is where you start. You refine it for every scene that you would use this for. In the vlog, when I use these settings, I noticed that it works extraordinarily well for a high resolution fire, which means a large one. So just stick with the settings. Okay, that is cool. We can just uncheck the color box over there and select our small displacement. Also give it a color ramp. This one will be in the normal mode, but it would be sharper. So in other words, it goes just over halfway, and also set to ease, and the white also comes in to make it nice and sharp, creating very strong little bumps that go up the flame. This one will remain at 0.25, depth of 2. Also again UV coordinates, but in this case I set the size to be 0.5. And of course normal is left on 1, displacement is set to 0.5. But it also remains unchecked. And of course color is also unchecked. So this is pretty much the notes. So let's see what we have after we have done our alpha. I want to do that first. I want to set to vertical. Now remember, the transparent part is supposed to be the bottom for some reason. I don't know why, but that's the way the view works. So we're just going to bring this up. So the white part is the transparent part. Okay, set that to alpha, refuse the color, and transparency. Okay, so I'm just going to turn off transparency for the moment because we first want to check that everything is working well. Control B, set a border, and render. Now see, this is way too strong. I was expecting that. I really was. So let's just add some subdivision. Gonna make it about 2. And now we can reduce the strength of these textures. So let's go for large displacement first and set it to 0.5. Let's turn off the other ones first so I can just see what it looks like. Let's make the texture broader so that it has less of a intensity, less of an intensity. So let's say our biggest flames go about like that, our biggest displacement. And let's add the small displacement in there. Also give it a little bit of space, a little bit more detail, and a lot less strength. Something like that should do. Have a little cupcake. Okay, now we can check our alpha. And we can turn on, let's just make this a little bit more intense. Okay, and now we can turn on alpha distortion, which is just a cloud texture that's going to create some distortion effects on our shape. We need to reduce the Y and we need to increase the X. We want these kind of streaks in the flames. Turn off color, turn on warping, about, let's go 4.3. That was the setting I used previously. I think it might be too narrow, so let's go for 2 or 3, 4. 4 seems fine. If we intensify it. Intensifying it is a bit much. Something along these lines is okay. And of course we can adjust the alpha a little bit higher as well. Okay. Now what we can do is we can help the fire look a little bit better. I just want to get this plane out of the way. I just want to get it to stretch a little bit more as it comes from under the flame. Let's see what that does. That's a little bit better. And of course, this one has to also go down a smidge, something like that. And let's see that. There we go, that's more rounded. I like it when it's a little bit more rounded. Okay. And now we can hit save on that. So, next step would be to composite this. So let's composite this into a scene, for lack of a better term. So this will be our background, and this will be our flames. Let's put the flames on the second layer, and everything background will be on the first layer, which is where our plane is. So let's set flames there, mask the first, only that, and we're not going to mask the flames out because we're just going to add them over. Okay, that's cool. On the background, on the flames, we don't need sky, we don't need edge, we don't need strand, don't need freestyle, don't need halo, don't need Z, don't need specularity, shadow emit, or any of that other fun stuff. I'm just going to turn off the environment map and the subsurface scattering. It does make a difference in speed by a few seconds or milliseconds. Even if it's not in the scene, it's still actually active for some weird reason. Okay, so let's just see what this looks like with a dark background. Just create a really strong nighttime kind of feel. Yeah, something like that. Let's hit save and turn off the hemis, and yeah, that should be it. And of course, let's just add a point lamp quickly so we just have some form of light. Okay, so now we have a point lamp. Make it yellow. A yellowish orange. Give it a good amount of strength with ray shadow, and that should give us something to look at. Okay. Let me just show you what it looks like. There are flames. There's the background. So go into your node editor. Trust me, the flames will look better in a moment. Select your flames, go color, mix. And this is how we add it to our background elements. Just want to select that. And you see I already have it the wrong way around, where the background is in where the flames are supposed to be. So we just need to switch that and stick the flames in there. This enables us to get a really, really smooth alpha finish. Okay, now you get to add the blur node. We usually add about 2 blur nodes. One is extremely large and the other one is fairly small. You can keyframe these based on the distance the flames are from the camera, but if you have a lot of flames on screen, just try and find a good average between the two. So take the original flames like that and add them over individually so that you have more control. In other words, one gets added over, and then the other one gets added over that. Don't forget to clamp. Okay, let's just put that in there. Okay, so 15 is going to be my big one, as you can see. But I definitely want to increase this this one as well. But I feel that the orange is too light. We definitely need to make it a darker, stronger orange. So let's make that. There we go. Let's re-render the flames. That's a bit better. I like that. That's more accurate. Let's increase the size here to be about 2. Clamp that and make it about 5 is a bit much. Wow. Okay. Let's see what happens if you reduce the yellow a bit. Like I said earlier, you adjust this. You just start out with what you do. Okay, I'm going to reduce the effect of the 15. And increase the size to about 3. And there you have it. Got a little campfire going there. Now what you can also do is you can animate this. I mean, what would a fire be if it's just sitting there, standing still? It would be an exhibit. Oh yeah. So let's just animate these textures. Now to get them going up, you have to take the Y value down. Don't ask me why it's that way. It is. It just is. I have no idea why. So let's start off with the large displacement. And we start at 0. And we say insert single keyframe. Go to the edge over there and say -8. And insert single keyframe. Do the exact same thing for the small displacement, but do it at half that. In other words, the small displacement goes slower. So in other words, instead of 8, we're going to go about 4. So again, 0, insert single keyframe, at the back, go -4, and say insert single keyframe. Now the problem with this is it would start slow, get fast, and stop slow. You want your fire to be able to continue going even if you extend your animation range, reduce it, etc. You don't want to have to readjust this all the time. So what you do is you go into your graph editor, and it's all selected because we just did this. You select channel, extrapolation mode, and linear. As you can see, it continues indefinitely this way and indefinitely that way. So even if your keyframes were, you know, all the way in here, somewhere over there, it would still extend backwards as well. So you're good. Go back into 3D view. So if you were to look at this right now in rendered view, you just select the fire, so it just renders a little bit faster. You can see it moves. Look at that. So we're going to save that. And I'm going to do a quick speed test render, because usually I find that I need to increase the speed. And I have had situations where I had to decrease the speed, but it's just something for another time. So let's do a quick render test. Gonna take off the border and reduce the resolution so it renders like super fast. Post-processing, compositing has to be turned on because, no, it does not. Because we just want to see the fire move. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Let's just call this a video. Let's say flame speed test .ogv. Always use OGG video because it's open source and it's free and it's royalty free and it's just awesome. Unfortunately, it's not as widely supported as I would like it to be, but I know that it will catch on. And of course, that is fine. That's fine. And remember, you have to adjust the speed according to the frame rate you are going to have. This applies to all animation. Just a heads up. Hit save and then hit animation. As you can see, it's rendering pretty fast. Unfortunately, not in real time. Having said that, I have applied a similar approach using displacement, you know, the displacement modifiers, for the OpenGL experiment for It Came Upon the Midnight Clear, which you can also check in the description. But yeah, that is the end of the render. Let's see how it did. Let's go video sequence editor and add the video. Okay, so this is our flame video. And it's a AB sync and it allows frame dropping, and let's see what that does. Now, when you see this kind of flickering, what that means is that the geometry wants increase because it's two textures crossing over each other. So the higher your level of geometry you have in your fire, the less of that jittering you will see. Having said that, with compositing, the jittering is also a lot less. And of course, with higher resolution. So what I usually do is I use 3 levels of subdivision instead of just 2. And of course, you have to refine your texture sizes sometimes to accommodate the change. So let's quickly do that. So I'm just going to add another level. As you can see, it increased the texture resolution there as well. So that means we need to increase our texture sizes. So instead of 0.25, I'm going to go for 0.3, 0.5. I'm going to have to do this in increments. I can see that we're not getting the best results here. So let's go for 0.25. I just want to see what it's supposed to look like on 2. Okay, that's what it's supposed to look like. Okay, let's go for 1. It's definitely not 1. I think we're okay with 0.3 or 0.4. Okay, and let's check the large. It's supposed to look like that. So let's go for 1. And let's add the small back. It's like the textures need a little bit of stretching, but I don't want to just stretch them unnecessarily. Let's do another quick render and see what that looks like. It's just one of the disadvantages of having to use the displace feature versus the displacement textures using the modifier, which you can do. You can use this method with modifiers. I'm going to show you how to do that after we are done with the textures. You may prefer to use that as it gives an immediate response, but I really actually do prefer to use this one. It's much less of a problem when you import it into another scene, because everything is contained on one object. There's no messing around with empties and all that kind of stuff. But for the sake of being thorough, I am going to show you how to do the whole empty thing as well. I'm going to do the whole empty thing. That's funny. Okay, so now let's go back to the... Yeah, that's very cool. I like that. I think it can go a little bit faster. So I think we should increase the speed. Let's go into our dope sheet. Skip the mouse to the first keyframe and scale it down to make it faster, out to make it slower. So I don't want it to be super fast. I just want it to be a little bit faster, about a third faster. And then you can give that another quick render. The cool part about using the empties and the over the textures is that you, number one, get to see immediate results, and number two, even after you've animated the empty, you can still adjust the scale of the textures manually based on your subdivision and all that kind of stuff. So it does get you more flexibility, but you do have to check and recheck for every project. So let's go back into the sequencer, refresh that. Okay, let's see it run now. Yeah, see, that's better. Now there's our campfire. And if you want to, you can stretch it out further to the top. You can adjust the yellow to actually have 3 tones, all that sort of thing. But just for the sake of making this a little bit faster and a little bit more interesting, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create like a little bit of a campfire scene in time lapse where I just add some flat color, cylinder logs, some monkeys, and all that kind of stuff. And then we will get to our point lamp. Okay, so now we have our little campfire scene. I just added a few things. So now we're going to be adding a point lamp to our fire that we can animate. So we're first going to be adding a Toon shaded one, because I already set up a very basic setup for Toon shading. For soft shadows, you can check the description for a full tutorial on getting Toon shading with soft shadows. But the focus now will go to the lamps. So what I need you to do is you need to add a point lamp. Put it nice and, not 100%, but just get it inside the fire. Fire. It's not a flyer, it's fire. Since we already made sure that the fire does not cast any shadows, that's not an issue. Let's just rename our point lamp to be point fire Toon, and we're going to put it on the Toon layer, which is the third one. Usually it's the second one, but because we already put the fire on the second one, yeah, it's just staying that way. Just go with it. So what you need to do is you definitely need to give it a ray shadow, give it a nice orangey color, increase its intensity, use about 3. The distance you can leave on 25. Samples 1, soft size 0, threshold on 1. Again, it helps speed it up. Of course, this stays on. I just increased the samples to 7. Earlier in the tutorial, it was set to 1, so it was really noisy. It's up to 7 now. And we can pretty much... we need to add it to a group as well for the compositing. So this one will go to Toon group. So let's do its animation. So first off, we need to animate its brightness. Now, when you do this, in general, you are going to struggle to see what you're doing, because you're going to have to scroll through it and see if the preview actually shows it. How the brightness fluctuates. Oh goodness, wrong place to put the keyframe. There we go. But because we have the viewport, with textured view, all you need to do is just select your freestyle layer, and you can actually see it. See what happens when I move it. So this will give us a real-time preview of what our lamp does. Unfortunately, it doesn't cast any shadows, but that's okay, because our focus will be on getting these lines to move, and of course getting the light's brightness to fluctuate. So go into the graph editor, since we have our keyframe on the energy. Just pull this slightly open, close this more off, and add a noise modifier. Now we have to check between frames 1 and 30 to see what will happen in the space of 1 second, since we have our animation set to 30 frames per second. So as you can see, this represents 1 second, this area over here. That's insane. We do not need a strobe light, we need a campfire. So within a second, it may fluctuate a little bit like this. So let's see what that looks like. We need to intensify that. So what I'm going to do is increase the strength. Play that again. It's a little bit too strong. Yeah, something like that will do. Now we're also going to be moving it, so you don't want to overdo any one thing. You can always adjust it later. So insert location for a keyframe. Control Z that because we weren't on frame 1. So try again, location. And select each one and add a noise modifier to them. But let's start with one at a time. So now we need to see our Z. And again, this is insane for a second because this is what happens. Crazy, absolutely crazy. So we just need to expand that a little bit so that we can again see what happens within the space of a second. So it's still too fast. Makes a little bit more sense. I'm just going to have it fluctuate on the X and Y axis, not the Z axis, just because going up and down with the fire is just, it's beyond what's necessary for this to work right. If you do go up and down with the Z axis, the shadows around the fire will fluctuate in length, not just direction. And we don't want them to fluctuate in length, we just want them to fluctuate in direction. So again, add a noise to the Y. You can do it like this if you want to. Find the Y. What you can also do to find it is you can just press home. That makes everything visible. Everything in the graph editor. So we just need to phase this differently. You can see it still needs to be scaled out. It's way too fast. A little bit more. A little bit more. Yeah, something like that should do it. You can see it's moving quite a bit. It's fluctuating darker and light as well. And there you have some light moving. Now, one thing to mention is that in anime shows, the light tends to dim and bright very sharply. You know, like really intensely the whole time. But because the lamps don't work like that in Blender, you can't just change their distance and expect it to change the diffuse size. It doesn't work like that. If you wanted to do that, you would have to adjust your diffuse size so that it fluctuates, which is something you can do. And just stick with this. Okay, so now, with that we have our, oh goodness, just want to mute the campfire. Now that we have our little light source working right, I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm going to move it to the background layer. Move over to the background layer, just make sure it's selected, and change its softness to be of about 2. Hit save on that. Go into the camera, select all the rest, and turn the campfire back on, and add the Toon to lamp. So let's just call this soft, because it has to give us soft shadows, and add it to the smooth group instead of the Toon group. Now, goodness sake. Smooth group, thank you. Now you can see it's working. So now that it's moving, I already set the groups in the render layers to receive only certain lamps, so it should be nice and functional. So let's see a full render of what it may look like. And anti-aliasing, and yeah. That is our final image. Looks amazing. So let's just render this out, and I will be back in a second. As you can see, it moves nicely. It moves these lines. It looks absolutely phenomenal. Now, what I said in the beginning of the video is that I would show you guys how to use empties to get a similar result. So that is what I'm going to be doing right now. So if you were in a 3D view and you were to see the fire, just need to make sure that it's selected. I'm going to momentarily turn off transparency and set it back to solid. Oh goodness, there we go. So let's focus on the fire. So now what you need to do is you need to add 2 empties, because they have to move at different speeds. So get 2 empties. You can duplicate them if you want to. And call this one empty large displacement. Make sure you spell it correctly. If you want to use the search bar later, it has to be spelled correctly. And let's just copy that name and just change the large to small. All you need to do is just hover over it and use Control-C to copy it and Control-V to paste over it. It's very simple. Okay, so this is our large displacement. Let's just close that for a second and add a displacement modifier. Call this new and call this displace large. Copy it, duplicate that, and call this one displace small. Okay, mute that. Now this one will obviously be a duplicate of what we have done before using the cloud basis and Voronoi. Obviously a lot larger, so this is where you get to scale it up. But before you scale it up, you have to set it to the empty first. I was a little bit quick there. So you can go Object and Large Displacement. So what you can do is you can choose to scale this instead of your texture. Just need to make sure that it only expands it. Something like that. You can change it as you see fit. Remember, you're not going to see this little point at the top. That kind of looks weird. You're just not going to see that. So just focus on your contours. The contours are good, so if you move this, you can see that it does its thing. So you do the same thing with the second one. Object. Set it to the empty. Then this one was obviously small and it's just a normal cloud texture. Make sure it's visible. Scale it up. Definitely needs to be reduced in strength, so that when you move it up, that's what you get. So it's fantastic. So what we need to do now is we can use a constraint to move this one with this one, but 50% its speed. So what you can do is you can animate this one, say location, go to 250, estimate how fast or how far it will go in about 10 seconds. I'm guessing about there. Insert location, go into the graph editor, same thing as we did before, extrapolation, linear, go back, so that when it moves, and when you turn it on, and this one off for the moment, you see this. Okay, that's good. I'm just gonna reduce this mid-level, just want to make sure it's the right one. A little bit more, I'm gonna leave it on 0.5, that's the default. Sure, it's very big. And we're going to constrain the location here. So copy location of this one and make it 0.5, not 50. See, as it moves at half the speed. So now you can select this one and go back in there, turn it on, and now when it moves, you can see it moves. But like I said before, the problem is that it looks weird. You need to adjust it so that it expands more than it contracts. In this case, we can actually reduce our amount of subdivision. So if you were to look at this in the render, you would see the following. I just want to disable this one texture so you can actually see that. Okay. That's what you would see. just because the scale of the empty textures is a little bit different. So let's just humor this system and expand these. To be a little bit more campfire-esque. Goodness, they have to move a lot faster than this. I just want to shrink this one down. This one needs to be a little bit more detailed. Okay, let's see what that looks like. Yeah, see, that's more like what we have. So you see, you can absolutely use empties if you want to. If you prefer empties, use empties. If you prefer to use just the plain textures, use the textures. I prefer the textures. Not everyone's cup of tea, but they work. And that's it for this part. I hope you find it useful. Please make sure you watch the rest of this series on fire. Have a great one and God bless you.